Okay, so it is coffee time. So go ahead and grab yourself a cup of coffee and come sit down and have a chat with me. I will wait for you to get your coffee. Alright, you back? Good, I hope so. If not, go ahead and pause the video and go grab your coffee and then start me back up. Today I want to talk to you guys about a study that was done about a year ago, so you might have heard of it, you might not have, but a study was done to see if Spongebob or shows like Spongebob compromise the brain power of preschoolers. According to the LA Times, a group of 60 4-year-olds, not 64-year-olds, but 60 aged 4-year-olds, were separated into 3 different subgroups. One group was to watch SpongeBob for 9 minutes. The other group was to watch a show called Caillou, which is geared towards 4-year-olds. After all, he is a 4-year-old in the show. They were to watch that show for 9 minutes, and the other group was to color or draw with crayons and markers for the 9 minutes. Immediately after their 9 minutes were up, they took a test to assess the executive function, which is thinking of their brains. I don't know exactly what the tests were. I couldn't find a sample of them. But they all took the same test. They took 4 of them. And the result was that the kids who watched SpongeBob scored significantly lower than the other 2 groups, who scored about the same. The point difference was an average of 12. The SpongeBob viewers scored an average of 12 points lower than the other 2 groups. And that was pretty much the conclusion of the study. They said that SpongeBob compromises the brains of preschoolers, and that preschoolers shouldn't watch that show. They didn't know the effect that it had on older kids, but they assumed that it was similar. According to CBC News, it wasn't that it was SpongeBob. It wasn't the content necessarily. It was that SpongeBob is classified as a fast-paced show. SpongeBob changes scenes from, say, the beach to SpongeBob's house to the Krusty Krab on an average of 11 seconds, whereas preschool-aged shows, educational TV shows, change scenes on average of 34 seconds. Now, the question I have is SpongeBob geared toward, well, I had a few questions. Is SpongeBob geared towards 4-year-olds, number one? Or are they actually supposed to be watching that show because shows have a target audience? Are 4-year-olds the target audience of SpongeBob? Also, how diverse was this? Obviously, there was one major flaw that I can find in the study, is that they only chose 4-year-olds. That's not very diverse, and it's a bit confusing because there was no additional studying done on 6-year-olds or 8-year-olds or 10-year-olds. It was only done on 4-year-olds. They claim that this was done because 4-year-olds' minds and brains are very absorbent and very impressionable. I argue that the brain of a 6-year-old is just as impressionable as the brain of a 4-year-old. Forgive me if I say his name wrong, but his name is Dr. Marshall Kornblum or something like that. He is a child psychiatrist, And he said fast-paced shows, his quotes are, fast-paced shows create temporary ADD effects after only 9 minutes. The thing is what he was pretty much trying to imply as he went on to talk. It was a full paragraph pretty much of things that he was saying. What he was trying to imply is that if only 9 minutes of watching this show, a child gets a temporary ADD, because they didn't test long term. They didn't test, a day after they watched the show. They didn't have them watch the show for 30 minutes. They didn't have them watch a full episode. But what he was trying to imply was, if after only 9 minutes a child has temporary ADD, who's to say that if a child watches a 30-minute episode every single day, they won't develop ADD or ADHD. This study was done on middle to upper class 4-year-olds who lived in middle to upper class homes. There were no middle to lower class homes or lower middle class children that were tested. And the children also were not tested before the study was conducted. Nickelodeon representative David Bitler said, quotes, "SpongeBob is geared towards school-aged kids, ages 8 to 11. And he said, having 60 non-diverse kids who are not part of the show's targeted audience could not provide the basis for any valid findings that parents could trust." So he pretty much says that 4-year-olds are not part of the targeted audience, and that because these kids were not diversified, because these kids, 1, were not diversified, 2, were not part of the targeted audience, this didn't provide grounds for any type of study that parents should rely on. I watched SpongeBob as a kid. I don't know how old I was when I started watching SpongeBob, but I did watch him as a child, and I feel that it didn't compromise my brain power or thinking power. I love to think. And I will let my children watch SpongeBob because I think SpongeBob is a really good show. I really like it. Even today, I find myself watching SpongeBob every once in a while. I think it's funny. I think it's cute. So I will allow my kids to watch SpongeBob, though I don't like a lot of TV shows for children now anyway, so my kids probably won't be watching TV too much when I have kids. But I feel like this study is complete BS. I feel like maybe if it was conducted better and more professionally, they could prove a lot more and get a point across that they were trying to prove. But because they had such a small group of kids, number 1, because they had such a non-diversified group of kids, number 2, because they chose kids not in the show's targeted audience, number 3, because they didn't test the kids before, number 4, I feel like this study is just BS, and that's why I feel like it didn't get as much traction as the researchers may have wanted it to get. Anyway, leave your comments down below what you think about the TV show SpongeBob, what you think about kids watching SpongeBob, and what you think about the study. See you later.